Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about the plight of men in Western civilization. And it's very clear at this point that men are opting out of Western society en masse. And let's look at some of the reasons for that. And so the term for it really is called Neet, not an employment, education, or training. And so let's see what this post says by What I Faithist. If you're a young, especially white man, in this day and age, you're expected to give up on all your dreams and then thank the society for it. So let's see what he has to say about this, and let's see what we agree with and what we disagree with here. You want a job? 95% of new job positions at big companies go to people of color. So if you're a white man, that's difficult because white men still make up the majority of Western civilization. And despite that, they're getting a fraction of the jobs. In fact, recent job employment data shows that white men are losing jobs frequently, and all job growth is occurring for people of color because organizations are very explicitly discriminating against white men. And if you're not a white male, maybe that's not something you're immediately concerned about, but we are already seeing evidence that this is occurring for white females. And this is also very frequently occurring for Asian males and Asian females. And so it should be concerning to you that there's been this inversion from a competence hierarchy to a kind of victim hierarchy, where the more victimized you are or say you are, that is going to get you ahead in Western civilization. I have made videos of this, but we're seeing the outcome of this, which is that diversity hires that are not based off of job performance or potential job performance are leading to disaster in a variety of companies such as Boeing and their airplanes. And they actually had a whistleblower who supposedly committed suicide right when he was supposed to talk about things in court that would be potentially damaging to Boeing. So apparently these companies, instead of hiring white people or Asian people, they are murdering people to cover up the fact that they are not hiring based off of job performance. That's the kind of assumption. That's a conspiracy theory right now, because it is a little bit weird that this person decided to come out as a whistleblower and then off himself right before he was supposed to testify. That should be suspicious to everyone. But that is the world we're living in. And that is how Western companies operate nowadays, where they don't fix things. They murder people instead, or potentially murder people. So anyways, I'm just going to move on. It goes on to say, you want a girlfriend? 80% of men in their early 20s are single. A majority are virgins too. So we've seen studies of this. Young men are single and young women are not. So that should tell you a few things. One is they're likely dating older males. And so that means that the sexual market value of older males is higher than younger males. And the sexual market value of younger females is higher than older females, because older females are not getting into committed relationships at as high of a rate as young females. And this should also concern you because these men are opting out of society. They don't see a point in a lot of cases. So they're not just waiting to become older to get a female, but they are deciding it's just not even worth it because of laws, because of cultural stigma, because of various accusations that could be pointed against them. One other thing I should say about that, about young females being promiscuous and young males just opting out of sex entirely, becoming involuntary celibate, or even in some cases voluntarily celibate. Women are typically, in a lot of cases, from what I've seen in the college days, they are going for the same males. And so there are a small fraction of males, which we call hypergamy, where this small segment, maybe like 10, 20% of the population, probably not even that high, it's probably more like 1% of the population, are sleeping with a ton of females, and these females are just sleeping with the same male. So a few, 20%, and that's that 80-20 Pareto distribution type of thing, a few males, 20%, are getting all the women in their younger days, and these women are just sleeping around with these men, are becoming very promiscuous. I don't know how else to put this, so I'm gonna just move on there. But you can see so far, men can't get a job, so they can't be productive. They can't get a girlfriend, so they can't propagate their genes, which is the underlying goal for every type of living organism. Let's see what else we have. So you want to follow a creative path. We're elevating other voices. I've heard that so often. You won't get the music or comedy or contract, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are not going at it alone, if you're trying to work for an organization, they are specifically hiring people of color. And so I say this all the time, but I've seen these things. 1 in 3 here, when it comes to jobs, I know for a fact that a ton of companies are doing this. This is actually my field. I have a doctoral degree in industrial and organizational psychology. People in my field, we study personnel selection, hiring practices, promotion practices. And I can tell you, I know people with doctoral degrees in my profession who go to court and really enforce these things. They're good people on an individual basis, but they make sure that diversity is the central goal of these organizations instead of job performance. And so these organizations, to a certain extent, aren't to blame for this because the court system is oriented around making sure that it's discriminatory towards white people and towards males. And now we're saying even towards females of white and Asian persuasion and Asian males. And so, yeah, whether it's creative jobs or any type of job, you're far more likely to get that job or far more likely to get into college, things like that, if you say that you are from an underrepresented minority background. And that's why so many young white people for college applications are saying that they're Native American, that they're Hispanic, that they are Asian, that they're Black, because it's very self-evident. What was that person's name? Rachel Dolezal, who was pretending to be Black. She was a white person. It's very self-evident at this point that being white is a detriment to getting jobs, to getting opportunities in Western civilization. And that should be concerning because in China, at the very least, they are trying to be meritocratic. They are trying to support competency as much as possible. In the West, they're not even attempting to do that anymore. So let's move on. We've spent a little bit too much time on those. So let's see. You leave to escape. You're a passport bro and a prior. Okay, so I've heard a number of people say this type of thing. I did leave. Partially it was to escape because Western civilization just sucks at this point, but it was also to be able to talk about these things openly. Because when I was in the West, I was a professor. I was very well liked by my students. I was very successful. And I shouldn't say professor because technically you're an assistant professor to start off with. So I was an assistant professor. Then you go up to kind of associate professor and full professor, but you don't need to know all that. Anyways, I was a tenure track assistant professor, and I just couldn't be honest about what was happening in Western civilization. Despite the fact that it was clearly, blatantly in decline, I had to just go along with it. I had to keep silent about what was happening. And so I couldn't have that anymore. And so I became a passport bro. I'm happily married now, and I have a child on the way. So you have to leave to escape, I think, at this point, especially because of the fact that even if you could get a job in Western society as a white person, as an Asian person, male or female at this point, if you are one of those people that is being actively discriminated against, why would you want to support that system either? So that was another thing that I had to think about. So it's very low cost of living in other places, so I would certainly recommend it. You opt out of the system, you're a Neet or incel. So I already explained what Neet meant and involuntary celibate. Incel meant if you react against society which treats you like this, you're a Nazi. They call everyone a Nazi anymore, so I just don't. I'm not fazed by it whatsoever. If you have hobbies, you're mocked as lame or a nerd. If you do get girls, society will demonize you as a heartbreaker or F-boy. Solid chances you get Me Too'd on no evidence. This is a concerning element to me, and this is at the heart of a lot of things, which is that accusations do not have the same punishment as the crime. So if you have a false accusation of sexual harassment or rape or something like that, if it comes out that you falsely accuse this person, you're not given the same severity of punishment. And that makes no sense to me because the stigma of these accusations stay with a person even if they're not formally charged in the legal system, even if they are found not guilty in the legal system, that stays with them for life. Okay, and so the fact that people can Me Too someone else without any evidence, they can decide after the fact that, oh, they were actually raped. That's horrific. You can't build a society based off of that ridiculousness. So it goes on to say, if you get married, 50% shot, your wife leaves you and takes the money and kids while you did nothing wrong. So again, the legal system is just so really deranged at this point. I think all these little things individually within the legal system were meant to be beneficial, and there are ways you could frame it as a beneficial thing, but it's very clear how this type of system can be gamed. And it seems like we got into the habit in Western civilization of making laws based off of the exception instead of making laws based off of the majority of cases. And making laws based on the exception is much more easily gamed because there's a ton of cases that don't fall within that exception than making laws that actually meet the needs of the vast majority of people. And so that's what we see here, where these laws are absolutely absurd, absolutely ridiculous when it comes to how discriminatory they are against males, especially because you have things like no-fault divorce, where women can just decide at any point in time that they wanted to get a divorce, and they keep the children. You can never see them as a father. They keep half of your money you for the rest of your life, pretty much. And it's horrendous what they do to men within Western society. So even if you find a good girl and you can settle down in Western society, there is no guarantee that your wife won't watch a TikTok someday and become a feminist. And I hate to put it like this, but women are very easily persuaded by consensus. And we could talk about this in another video if you're really interested. And I have talked about this a little bit, which is that because women are less physically dominant, they have to be aware and they have to try to conform to consensus, because they could be throughout our history, evolutionarily, they had to adapt to the fact that they weren't physically dominant, and they weren't able to hold themselves in a physical confrontation. So they have to learn to conform to others. They have to learn to go along with consensus. And so for them, things like social media, it's very easy for women to be persuaded by social media, because that's how they've evolutionarily adapted to follow along with a consensus. And that's not every woman, and women can certainly go against that. In fact, we know that average IQs for males and females are pretty much exactly the same, although there's a different spread of scores. We could talk about that in another video. But the point here is, at any time, a wife could, in Western civilization, could decide to take half of your money and your children, and even make false accusations against you, and the court system will entirely support them in that. Moving on to, society will never give you advice for your issues. This is, even if they give you advice, it's typically terrible advice. So again, I have a degree in a subfield of psychology, and I know what type of advice they give you, and it is horrendous for men. Like, you should do the exact opposite as a male of what a lot of the social and behavioral sciences tell you. And it is partially because of the fact that the social and behavioral sciences at this point are a very female-dominated field, to the point where they don't even understand males to a large extent. And how do I want to put this? In Western society, they talk about things like toxic masculinity quite a lot. But when you think about the fact that our mental health professionals are female, our teachers, both K through 12 and at the higher education level, are females. When you talk about the fact that a lot of single parent households are female, it is women that are teaching these past few generations of males throughout Western civilization. They are the primary role models for males. Okay? So if there is any sort of toxic masculinity that's appeared, which we've talked about this primarily within the past few decades, if this has appeared, it is because women are teaching men the completely, entirely wrong lessons about how to act as a male. So society does not give advice, but when it does give advice, it gives very terrible advice to males. Because as I said, you will never hear your stories represented in the media. Yeah, they talk about this all the time, where they have to raise other voices. And so if you're a straight white male, you're just not heard at all within Western civilization. You're suppressed in the algorithms. If you have a business on Yelp, your businesses are pretty much ignored. While if you're a black person and you own a business, it's labeled black-owned business. I read a study and talked about that study a few days ago, and those businesses get more traffic. So you're really, really ignored if you are white or Asian in Western civilization. It goes on to say, if you will not be promoted in your job for your competency, you will not be promoted in your job for your competency in most cases. That is the case where not only do they need to hire the right people for jobs based off of diversity qualifications, but they also need to promote people based off these diversity qualifications. That's been a recent pressure. So there's no meritocracy with hiring or promotions anymore in Western civilization in their organizations. And a lot of this stems from the law where they could be sued if they don't do things based off of diversity qualifications instead of performance qualifications. Moving on, says the educational system literally publicly humiliates your race and sex on a daily basis. You have to effectively swear fealty to this humiliation to get a degree. That is entirely true. I have, I think, like a half dozen degrees at this point, multiple associate's degrees, bachelor's, 2 masters, a doctoral degree. I have a lot of degrees. And I can tell you that I can't remember what year I started college, but I was certainly in college during the switch in, I think it was 2016, when things really started to become bad in the education system. And you started to see the people who really hated males and hated white people to take over the education system. And they really did have things like humiliation rituals directly in the class that humiliated you for being a male or for being white or for being straight. They called you breeders, things like that. And this was, at the time, I was just like, I was very open-minded, so I'd hear people out. And I still am kind of like that. So I wasn't overly fazed by it. Sometimes it did faze me, don't get me wrong. And sometimes I even tried to report it and it just did not work. The discriminatory practices that went on, because the problem is, if you try to report this, everyone along the chain of command up to the absolute top is in favor of these discriminatory practices. And so you report it and that just puts a target on your back. And I know this from a couple different experiences, but the thing is, you have to kowtow to them to a certain extent. I, again, was completely unfazed by some of their practices, and so I went along with it. But I assessed the situation in my later years in academia, and I said, this cannot keep going on. I mean, sure, I'm unfazed by it, but it was very clear that other straight white Christian males were, if you were any one of those categories, they were fazed by it, and they would opt out of continuing education. And so this could not keep going on. And I assessed the situation. I realized that it was, at its core, a fundamentally broken system at this point, and there was no real redeeming it. And so that's why I had to leave and start to be honest about the system. But I can say this from direct experience, that the education system hates you if you're any one of the following categories: straight white Christian male. They absolutely hate you. They do things that are literally illegal, and they've been sued for. I know of one public institution that was sued multiple times. Discriminated against a veteran male, discriminated against a male nurse, discriminated against a male social and behavioral sciences faculty member, lost millions of dollars in these lawsuits because apparently the legal system was still willing to be honest about these cases a few years ago, to the point where they actually offered one professor $1 million just to leave the institution. This was a public institution, okay, mind you. They offered him $1 million just to leave because he was a tenured faculty member, and they didn't want to stop doing illegal things. So that should tell you something about the current state of the American legal system. So let's kind of try to wrap this up now. Growing up, you'll be torn down for being boyish. The teachers called my parents into school since I drew swords for fun. Yeah, that's the thing. When you have all-female teachers, they don't understand males at all. Like, they barely even interact with males aside from thinking about how brutish males are. If you have trauma or mental health issues, society doesn't care at all. As someone with PTSD, I can say firsthand, okay? If you talk about these issues, you'll be shamed or potentially fired or deplatformed. You'll be derided for studying the things men like to do, like war, technical skills, philosophy, craftsmanship. We don't view these as useful. Yeah, the thing is, these activities are extremely helpful. And if men don't do that, societies tend to fall apart. And we are seeing exactly that because men are more and more opting out of Western civilization. And finally, if you work out too hard, you'll be viewed with suspicion and discriminated against by leftists. Yeah, we've actually found that right-wing conservative views are related to physical fitness levels. Meanwhile, you're expected to pretend there's no issues and everything is fine. You have to live that lie. Older people don't care about what you're facing. You're an expendable pawn who they want to shut up. That being said, once these issues reach a fever pitch politically and young men react, the elites will be shocked. Okay, so a few things to talk about here. Meanwhile, you're expected to pretend there's no issues and everything's fine. I had to do that for many years. And I thought at first that maybe I just had the wrong view because I was younger, I was not as well educated, came from a poor background. But as I got more and more educated, I realized these people are just morons. And for some reason, they're at the wheel of Western civilization. I don't know how this happened. And so I had to study it. And now I understand how it happened. And so I had to get out of that situation so I could speak freely about what's happening. And that's why you're seeing these videos now. So it goes on to say, older people don't care about what you're facing. So I saw this a lot. And I've talked about this in other videos too, which is that these older people, especially the baby boomer generation, they put the laws in place for like the legal system that was discriminatory against males, that were discriminatory against white people for jobs, things like that. And they look at the situation now and the decline of Western civilization and the fact that men are opting out of civilization. Really, a lot of people, younger people, are just opting out because they can't make a living on the salary, the wages that they're being offered and things like that. And they assess the situation that they created and say, well, at least I won't be around to see the actual collapse because they're extremely old and infirm at this point. It's shocking to me that even if they have descendants, they don't care at all. Like, I've not met a baby boomer that truly cares at this point, that their policies, the things that they've been voting on, has led to this situation. They just don't care. They fundamentally do not care. They're like, at least I won't have to see the ramifications. And I don't understand that mentality. I don't think there's ever been a generation that has done that type of thing before or after the baby boomer generation. So it's just wild to me. But yeah, this is what we're facing in Western civilization and why I continue to speak out about the terminal decline of Western civilization. Thank you so much for investing your time in watching this video. If you found the content informative, be sure to show your support by giving us an upvote. Your engagement goes a long way in boosting our visibility within the algorithm. To stay ahead on the most pressing contemporary issues, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're committed to delivering up-to-date, thought-provoking content on a daily basis. And we want you to be a part of this journey. Also, your thoughts matter to us. So please share any comments, questions, concerns, and/or critiques in the comment section below. I personally read each one and I respond when necessary. Given the nature of our content, where we expose the actions of the oligarchs who exploit the masses, intentional suppression in the algorithm is an unfortunate reality. If you believe in our mission, you can help by spreading the word. Tell your friends about our content. Let's amplify the voices of those that challenge the status quo. Speaking of amplifying voices, I need your help. As many of you know, I gave up a lucrative career in the fastest growing field and the highest paying subfield of psychology in the United States to move to the Philippines to provide content that I think is important for my viewers to hear. I left so I could avoid repercussions for speaking about topics that are taboo in the United States. This decision came with significant financial sacrifices, but your support can help sustain the work we do. Check out the links in the description for how to support our channel. Every contribution, big or small, is genuinely appreciated. Finally, as a channel, we stand with the people of Palestine. We believe in their freedom, and by supporting us, you can contribute to this shared vision. Thank you for being a part of our community. Your viewership is invaluable, and I genuinely hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.